Hey guys and gals, quick tutorial here today, how to get your front wheel off of your Yamaha R1. So what we're going to need is a 32mm socket for this nut right here. We're going to need a 6mm hex key for your pinch bolts and an 8mm hex key for your caliper bolts. So the first thing we want to do is we want to loosen up these pinch bolts just a touch on the side that's got the nut, and we're going to leave them tight on the side that's holding the axle. And before we lift the front end into the air, we're going to loosen up this axle nut here, just until it's loose. We've got a head lift stand here, so it's got a pin that is specially designed to go into the bottom triple clamp here in the R1. And we'll take, and I've got a nice snap-on 8mm hex. You don't need anything that's that fancy, but with these bolts, your braking system on a bike like this is the most important system you've got. These bolts, you know, they're really important. You want to make sure they go back in properly, they go back in tight, and that you don't end up stripping the inside of these bolts out at all. These 4 bolts on the bike are the most critical four bolts. It's the only thing that's stopping your bike. And when you're going 150, 160 miles an hour, you really want to make sure that bike stops every time. So one thing you don't want to do is leave these calipers dangling by themselves, hanging from these brake lines for any kind of extended period of time. If you're just popping a wheel off, popping a wheel back on, it's probably okay to let them hang there for a couple seconds. But if it's any longer than that, you want to make sure that they're supported. One of the nice things about this bike is you'll see when I pull this caliper off. See when I pull the caliper off, it's got these locating pins here and the caliper. So even when the bolts are completely out, that thing's still going to stay there and be supported while I take the other side off. Now for me, I'm not just taking the front wheel off to do a quick wheel change. I'm actually taking it off so I can send my forks in and get them switched out with the proper race forks. It'll be the next video that I make. So they're going to be here for a while. So again, like I said, you don't want to leave this thing hanging there just by the brake line itself. Even though it is a stainless steel brake line, that's still a lot of stress to put on them. And again, this is the most important system on your bike. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a couple quick zip ties, and right here on the front of my bike, on the fork stand, just going to take and zip tie this in place. That's going to take all the pressure off of this line here, leave it in place and leave it supported for a couple weeks while these forks are out. And then when I get back, the brake lines are still going to be good, and we're able to put the bike back up. So to get this caliper out, you take it back off those pins. It's going to feel like it doesn't want to come out. It's going to feel like it's stuck, especially when we have the valve stem right there. But there is just enough space if you wiggle this caliper to get it to come off from the wheel. And again, take 2 zip ties. And we'll support this up here. Again, if you're only doing a quick wheel change, you don't need to use zip ties every time you do it. But in this case, the bike's going to be gone for a while. So now we've got the brake calipers off. We've already loosened our pinch bolts on this side. We've loosened our axle nut and completely removed our axle nut. So now we have an identical set of pinch bolts on the other side of the fork. Go ahead and loosen those. Don't have to pull these all the way out. They should only be just a little tight. So loosen it, then you take your axle, push, support the wheel with your hand, pull the axle out to the side. And your front wheel's off. Good job. One thing to keep in mind, you've got these spacers here when the front wheel comes out. These are not captive spacers online. You can buy special captive spacers that stay in with the wheel. They have a tendency to get lost, so it's a good idea to just pop them out before you bring your wheel over to get the tire changed and just leave them sitting there. So, my wheel's out, we'll put it up in the rack, and we'll get on to the next step of the video.
Thanks, Mike.